Yo, what's up guys? Welcome back to my channel. Before we get into today's video, just a quick note that only 11% of you guys are subscribed right now. So please consider taking 5 seconds to subscribe. You ultimately lose pretty much nothing and it really means a lot to me. It helps my channel grow. Now, we've talked in the past about the confusion over who is and who isn't OG. It's actually the #1 question that I get on my channel on pretty much all of my videos is, does this account qualify as an OG username? And of course, being an OG is a very rare thing, considering Minecraft Java Edition has over 30 million accounts. And as we all know, Minecraft is a one name, one account game, which essentially just means that there cannot be 2 accounts with the same username. Now, over time, OG accounts have earned a reputation in the Minecraft community, and many players obviously desire to own or even befriend OG users. But today, like I said, I'm going to be kind of settling the rules or putting tests in place that you can all use to figure out on your own without asking someone if a username qualifies as OG. So let's go through what makes a username OG. Now, rule #1, nouns, verbs, and adjectives. So all English nouns, verbs, and adjectives are considered OG in Minecraft, usually due to their familiarity for Minecraft's mainly English-speaking community. Now, I'll get in a little bit about how Minecraft is an obviously very international game with a lot of non-English speaking players, but for the most part, the community is at least majority speaking English, so mostly English words are considered OG. And this is probably the most useful rule to live by because most OG accounts fall sort of underneath this umbrella. Now, just in case for those who might not know what a noun, verb, or adjective is, nouns are words that refer to a person, place, thing, or object. So for example, one of my friend's account name is Believer, and a believer refers to a group of people who believe in something. So again, that's referring to a group of people, which makes it a noun. Now, verbs are a word used to describe an action, state, or occurrence. So kind of running with the last example, to believe in something is to accept that thing as true. And finally, adjectives are words that help describe or modify other words. Now, my username falls underneath this category because Fatal describes how lethal an attack is. It modifies the words that follow it so that you kind of understand and have a greater context on what someone is saying. But that is sort of the rundown on what nouns, verbs, and adjectives are, your little English 101 lesson for the day. You didn't know you were going to get educated when you clicked on this video, but you are. Moving on to rule #2, impossible usernames. Now, of course, this refers to usernames that are no longer possible to create in Minecraft. For example, Minecraft has a 3 to 16 character limit on what you can change or create a Minecraft account username as, so usernames that are shorter or longer than this limit are considered OG. Now, usually, I think I have heard of a few accounts that have over the 16 character limit, but generally this refers to accounts that are underneath the 3 minimum. So for example, I have a friend AA, that would be considered OG. And there are actually a lot of videos out there in the community about single letter usernames like letters A, B, G, 8, the number 8 that is. So there are a few accounts, but not many that fall underneath this rule. And generally these accounts are usually considered more valuable just because they are a much, much smaller group of OGs. And then finally, #3 for rules of who is an OG, that would be the non-English exceptions. There are many exceptions, of course, to the general rule #1 about English nouns, verbs, and adjectives due to the nature of Minecraft being an international game. So generally, words and languages that extend past borders and can be expressed in the Latin alphabet, which is what English is expressed in, also follow the first rule of nouns, verbs, and adjectives. So if you're thinking like French or Spanish, both of those languages with very common nouns, verbs, and adjectives, those would also be considered OG accounts. Now, kind of flipping the script and going to who isn't an OG account, we have to talk about SemiOGs because they are kind of this weird middling group that is much much larger than the OG group, but is of course a little bit separated from all of the like 30 million accounts out there that aren't even considered OG or SemiOG. So SemiOGs mostly fit under the category of containing words that aren't actual words. So what I mean by this essentially is if you smash two English words together, like fatal memes or O time, that would be considered a SemiOG account because they contain two English words that are real, but they're just smashed together, so it's not considered OG. Then the other type of SemiOG account that I see a lot, these are actually kind of funny to see because a lot of times you'll catch yourself and you'll be like, oh my God, it's an OG, like what's up? And then you'll realize that it's spelled wrong. And like I said, there are actually quite a few of these SemiOGs who kind of parade as OGs, kind of relying on people not knowing how to spell. But of course they are semi because they're not real words. Now I would say I'm very lenient on this rule because a lot of people would consider a misspelling of an OG word or an OG account to just be considered a non-OG account entirely. I feel like if you're really close to the extent that people mistake your account for being an actual word or an actual OG account, then you're pretty much a semi-OG. Obviously, there are many more semi-OGs that exist than actual OGs just because you can smash a lot more words into combinations than are actual words. So it is a little bit larger group than the OGs that are quite rare and you won't run into quite a bit. Finally, moving on to the final rule, any usernames that aren't words, contain numbers, or non-letter characters are considered non-OG. So for example, John Smith 1996, of course, John Smith is a very common name, but it includes numbers, so it would be considered non-OG, non-semi-OG. And pretty much the vast majority of Minecraft accounts exist underneath this umbrella of either not being real words, that aren't even close to real words, that contain numbers, or contain non-letter characters. Now this rule is the most finicky of any of the rules that I've talked about because you can run into accounts that would be considered OG by the community that contain non-letter characters that are usually impossible to get into the game. Now, Mojang is usually very quick to deal with these accounts. There have been instances in the past of non-letter characters that are usually impossible to get into a username getting into the game. And so those would be considered OG accounts just because of the rarity and the fact that they fall under rule number 2 of being impossible usernames. And that's just one example of sort of the exceptions that exist to this last rule of who isn't an OG. Of course, it's a very large umbrella, so you can imagine all the exceptions that people have found to kind of get around this. But in general, just remember, if a username isn't even close to a real word, if it contains numbers or non-letter characters like an underscore or a dash or a slash or whatever, that would be considered non-OG. And that's it. Those are the rules that are generally accepted in the community and that you can use to judge for yourself whether a username is OG, semi-OG, or non-OG. Now, I would just like to say that these are the rules that I use personally to kind of tell who's an OG, who's a semi-OG, who's non-OG. So you're definitely going to find OG accounts that would disagree with what I'm saying, or people in the community who have small little like nitpicky things where they'd be like, well, there is an exception to this rule using this OG account as an example. But like I said, this is just what I use. You guys can feel free to use these rules as well. But in my next video, I'll be covering how you guys can cop an OG username. Like I said at the beginning, the number one question I get on my channel is, does this username qualify as like an OG or a semi-OG account? And the second most question that I get is, how do you become an OG user? Now, I've covered in one of my previous videos how I got an OG username. I was actually like the first paid account that had the username Fatal. But a lot of people, now that it's 2020 and OG usernames are really hard to come by, a lot of people want to know how they can become one. So that'll be my next video, and I'll be going in depth on how you can get an OG account. But until that comes out later this week, I will see you guys next time. Deuces. Backlash written on me, card popping on a glass bowl. I've been ballin', bring my ladies in, counting down. I'm already out, already on the countdown. I'ma set it right.